Okay, class. So for this week, we're going to pick up from the last session when we started creating our roof last week, where the focus was to get the cleaned up of the valley rafter where it meets the fascia board, as well as the hip rafter where it meets the fascia board in the corner there. So we are now going to be moving to the step where the same valley rafter where it meets with the ridge board to form that intersection. We're going to clean that up. So this is kind of similar to what we're doing. So this would be like your valley rafter going up here, and it meets with this ridge board and the blind hip. So you have three pieces of board meeting: ridge, blind hip, and valley rafter. So we need to get those three boards meeting together. This is a kind of close-up. This is not really a nice clean joint, but I just give it to you like that so that you can have an idea where we're at. So in reality, it ought to look like this. So the yellow line represents the center of the three members. And that basically would represent how the loading will distribute throughout the members evenly. So the ridge board is on the right here. The flying or blind hip coming down to meet that one. So two pieces of board meeting together there. And those two pieces of board will now be supporting the valley rafter, which is in the inner portion right here. All right, before we get to that intersection, we're going to be looking at how we draw that. So we're going back to our AutoCAD screen where we can now work on that portion of the drawing. All right, so we're going to zoom in now, which is at the top of the valley rafter. So here is our valley rafter, and we're going to go up to the top. So I'm zooming in now where those three members will meet. So this over here on the right would represent our ridge board. The one on the left would represent our blind hip, and the one in here represent the valley rafter, which is going to be supported by these two members. So I'm going to start out by working on the ridge and the blind hip, and then afterwards I will support the valley rafter. But I'll start with cleaning up the center lines first with my fillet. So I want to ensure that my radius for fillet is 0 so that the three lines meet together. This one, which is the blind hip, meet with the valley and the ridge. The ridge board is okay, I don't need to do anything. So in fact, I just really need to fillet these two at 0 radius. So if I go with F for fillet, enter, and then I'm going to ensure that my radius is 0. Let me go again. So F for fillet, enter. My radius currently is 20. So I need to either type R, enter, or click on radius down here, and then set the value of my radius to 0. Okay. And then all I need to do is click on this line, which is the center line of my valley rafter and the center line of my blind hip. So now I have these three lines meeting accordingly. I am not going to be getting rid of my center lines because it is going to help me to know what's going on at every step of the game. All right. So let's move on. All right. So what I will do next is also fillet the top of my ridge and the blind hip to have the two of them meeting here. I'm trying to clean up that one first. So let me press enter to repeat the fillet. That's this one and that one. Good. So that basically will terminate right there. And then I'm going to set my cutting edge on this line here and trim off the excess going up. So TR for trim, enter, and then remove that portion. So this line is taken care of there. I can now see my blind hip right there. But now I want to get my ridge board terminating on the blind hip. So I set my cutting edge here and TR and trim off this little piece right here. Good. So you can now see the ridge board meeting against the hip, blind hip. So now I have two cutting edges now, so I can terminate my valley rafter. So I have a cutting edge here and I have a cutting edge there. So TR for trim, enter, and then I can trim that one. Then I can trim that one. However, I need to also trim it down here again. So what I have is the rafter now meeting two cuts. One cut against the ridge board and another cut against the blind hip. So these two pieces of board will first meet ridge and blind hip to support the valley rafter. I'm leaving the yellow lines to indicate the different the center lines. Okay. All right. What I'm going to do though, I'm going to change the line weight of my center line to, because it's a little thick, I just want the outer lines to be heavy. So I'm going to select all of my center lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have some more over here. Center lines. I'm going to change the line weight so that it's very thin and only the line weight of the rafters will be a little heavy. Matter of fact, I don't even need the line weight for any of my rafters to be heavy. So what I will do is force all of them because I don't want it to look too cumbersome. So let me select all of my rafters, whether center line or not. I'm going to just select all of them and force the line weight for these to be default. You know what? Since it's on by layer already, what I will do is just change the line weight of the layer because I don't need it to be heavy. It's just that in the roof plan, sometimes you might want the line weight to be a little heavy, but you can go with the roof plan with the line weight. So let me mute those persons who have just joined us. Okay. All right, good. I'm going to go to my layer and change the line weight of my roof to be thinner than it is. I only want those line weights when I cut through them, they'll be a little heavier. So this one really shouldn't have been so broad. So I'm changing back the line weight. For my A roof, instead of 0.4, I'm putting it back to default. All right, good. You'll notice that the line weights are not so heavy anymore. Okay, good. So now I have my intersection right here where the valley meets the hip and ridge. Now I'm going to work on another intersection, and that's this one, where I have the two hip rafters meeting with the ridge board. But really and truly, normally you should have three common rafters meeting perpendicular to each other, and then these meet like that. So let me give you a graphical view of what it looks like. Graphical view. So I'm going to go back to the screen where we can now see that intersection. So we're talking about an intersection like this. where you have the ridge board, common rafter, common rafter, common rafter, perpendicular to each other. And then you have the hip rafters on either side in between. So that's a close-up shot of it. A little further out on the shot, you have common rafter, common rafter, common rafter, all perpendicular to each other. And then your hip rafter between. And this is also another view from above. And this is what it looks like underneath. So you have the ridge board, common rafter, common rafter, common rafter. Now this common rafter is what we call the king rafter or crown rafter. And then we have the hip rafters like that. So in plan, it ought to look something like this. So we have the ridge board, and then we have the common rafter either side of your ridge board at the end here, as well as here. So the three common rafters will be perpendicular to each other. This one is really the crown or the king common rafter. And then in between you have the hip rafter. Now what I'm going to take you through is our 5 simple steps to get you to look like this. And the steps are listed here. 1, we're going to extend the ridge lines to the center of the hip, which is why I change the color. So if you have the ridge line and we extend it down to touch the center line of the hip rafter on either side. And then step 2, and the numbers on this correspond with the numbers down here. So the steps basically correspond with these numbers. I just number it graphically so that you can see the steps here corresponding. So number 1 was to carry the lines down to meet to the hip rafter. Then number 2 now would be to terminate where your ridge board is. So we would draw a line from endpoint to endpoint. So that you could now see your ridge board doing this. Okay. Then now, step 3 would be to draw those lines now, which would represent the common rafters. So from the end of your ridge board, we would draw the line coming down perpendicular to the inside. I use this line here so to represent your fascia board. So we carry it down from the end of the ridge board to the fascia board, and you would do the same thing on the 3 sides because we're drawing one side for each common rafter. Then step 4 now would be to offset to get the other side. So we offset 50 to get to the other side of the common rafter. Same thing, you offset above, offset above. And then the last step now would be to set cutting edges on either side of the hip. This is your hip rafter. So we have a cutting edge here and a cutting edge there. And then we trim off the excess line on the hip rafter. All right, so we're going to do those steps now in AutoCAD, going from the first step. So remember, the first step is to extend your ridge line to the center of your hip rafter. So we're going to go back over to AutoCAD where we can do those steps. All right, so here we go now. Step 1. I'm going to zoom in right here. And that is to extend these 2 lines, 1, 2 lines to these 2 lines, 1, 2. All right, so I'm going to use the shortcut extend. So EX, enter, and press enter one more time, which would mean select all. So it means that when I click on this line, it's going to extend it to the nearest boundary, which is this line. And I'm going to extend that line, and it goes to the nearest boundary, which is this line. Good. So I can now see my 2 ridge lines, so I can terminate them now from endpoint to endpoint. So we draw a line from endpoint of this line to endpoint of that line. Good. So that is where your ridge board would terminate. But I'm just going to use the advantage that I have right now to go ahead and just draw the one side of your common rafter. So I'm going to zoom out and carry it, and it will be good if your ortho is on now so you can easily go across until we get to the inside of the fascia board, and we need perpendicular O snap. So that line was drawn from end point, right? End point of your ridge board to perpendicular inside of your fascia board. That's one. Remember, it's three of them we have. So we need to draw another one again. So L for line, enter. And from that same point, we could carry one coming down, whether intersection or end point. And that one is going to go all the way down again to inside of your fascia board, perpendicular. Good. Then now, the last one, we're going to go from the opposite end this time. So from end point, but this time around, we can't get to the fascia board because the fascia board is all out here. So we're just going to let it pass over. So this one really and truly is not a common rafter. It is a valley jack rafter. It's going to go against the valley rafter. So we'll just keep the ortho on and just let it pass over. I don't want to click on it because I won't know exactly where on that line. So it's best that you let it pass over it and click, and then later on I press enter, and then later on we can trim up against this line. So we just need to draw one side. So we have one side going this way, one side going that way, one side going this way. So our next step would to get the other side, which is now to offset it. So if I were to type O, enter, and the distance that we're offsetting is 50 millimeter, that's the actual width of the rafter. So 50, enter. We're going to click that line and offset it above, click this line and offset above, and this line to the right. Now, how do we know which side to offset it? The important thing is that you must remember that the common rafters must touch your, or these rafters must touch your ridge board. So if this and that, so if these three lines make up my ridge board, 1, 2, 3, it means therefore I must get this line going, touching. So if I were to offset this line below, then it would not be touching my ridge board. In fact, it would not even be a common rafter, although this one is not. But over here, it's a better one to understand it from. If I were to offset this one down, then it would not be a common rafter. It automatically would become a hip jack rafter. But because I offset on above now, it's touching the ridge board. So it is now a common rafter. So what I need to do is to set the cutting edges on those sides, on either side of the hip rafters, in this case, hip over here and hip over here. So cutting edge for this line, cutting edge for this line. So I can trim off that line, I can trim off that line, I can trim that line, I can trim line. So once you can identify your hip rafter, you know that your cutting edge will be on either side with your common rafters. So TR, enter, and you're going to be trimming off the excess. So as you can see right now, that's your hip rafter fitting right between there. So likewise, if this is the cutting edge, then this is the line that you're trimming. And if this is your cutting edge, then this is the line that you're trimming. So as you can see right now, we're seeing the three members. We're seeing the hip rafter on either side. We're seeing common rafter, common rafter, common rafter meeting with ridge board. All right, so we're going to do that 2 more times. Up here, same principle. So let's go again. Step 1 was to extend EX, enter, enter. So we extend ridge line, 1, 2, enter. Then we're going to terminate the ridge board, line command, from end point to end point, and we just continue with another line to the inside of the fascia board, perpendicular. That's 1. Repeat the command again. So we need 3 lines, right? We have 1 so far. So we need 1 more from that same point, going up to the inside of the fascia board, perpendicular. Oh snap. So we click, enter to end the command, enter to start but the command, and we want one going the opposite direction now. So here we have a line going from end point or intersection, and this time around we don't know where it is going to stop, so we just carry it across and click, keep it horizontal. Then we're going to offset. So of course in this case, if you offset it above, it will not be a common rafter. It won't touch the ridge board, neither will it touch on this side. So that's how we know where to offset. So it must be touching the ridge board, so we have to offset down and then offset this to the right. So O, enter, and the last time we offset our distance was 50. So we don't have to type it again, we just press enter to repeat the distance. So we're going to offset the vertical one to the right, offset the two horizontal ones below. Good. And it's time to clean up. So on either side of hip, 1, 2, 3, 4. TR for trim, enter, and we're going to trim the excess. That would be the distance beyond. See? You cutting edge there, so you trim off the excess over here. Cutting edge there, trim off the excess over here. Cutting edge there, excess. Cutting edge there, excess. And we end up with that. So 5 simple steps. We have one more time to do the same thing on the other side of the roof over here. One more time. So by the third time, you should get it if you didn't get it before. So I'll begin by cleaning up our center lines first. So fillet with that. So F, get my first 10 minutes countdown. Hopefully we'll finish the cleaning up after, before we reach the end of our first segment. So F for fillet, enter, and radius is already 0, so I don't need to click these two. If you notice, my center lines are clean up. But I'm going to clean up the other two. So let's do one more set of fillet. F, enter, M, enter, since I'm going to do it twice. So I'm going to clean up these two just to have them getting rid of some of those excess lines. And these two. Good. All I wanted to do is just get the place look a little bit more organized to work with. Step 1, extend ridge to center of hip. So E, X, enter, enter. Put it in the shortcut mode. So we extend 1, 2. Do not extend your center line. Then we're going to draw the line L for line, enter. We're going to terminate the ridge board. So from end point to end point. So my ridge board has been terminated. So I'm ready now for my common rafter. So we're going north first, one side of the rafter first. So enter, enter to repeat the command from the same point. We're going to go east, zoom in. It's not perpendicular. Remember that it should be on the inside face, not the outside face. So perpendicular, enter, enter to repeat the command. We have one more. Remember, it's 3 common rafters. So this one going from the opposite point, and we're going south this time. So we're going down again to perpendicular on the inside. Escape. All right, so we have one side for those 3 members. We can offset the other 3 lines. So O for offset, our last offset distance was 50. So I press enter to repeat that distance. We offset to the left for these 2 vertical lines, and the below for the horizontal lines, 50. Good. Then our last step would be to set the cutting edges on either side of our hip rafter, and then trim. TR, enter. Trim off the excess. So this is my cutting edge. So this is my line. That's my cutting edge. That's my line. So my cutting edge, that's the line. This is my cutting edge. So this is the line you're trimming. So there we have the common rafters. One, two, three of them. And in between those two, we have hip rafter, hip rafter. Okay, let me save the changes thus far. So that basically would be the layout of the roof that you would, these are the rafters that you would likely to put up first. Now the next stage of the game now would be to look at how you populate the rest of the roof with the other rafters. And that will include a lot of what we're going to be using now, mirroring and array. So we'll first array to get multiple offset, and then we're going to be trimming to clean up in each case. So I have the steps that we're going to be looking at. So let me jump back over to the presentation. All right, so that's where we are so far. And then now, what I've done is to give you the steps and color code them. So I'm going to talk you through these 3 steps, and then hopefully after our disconnection, we will come back and apply them. So the red dot would indicate the red over here, and the blue dot represent the blue dot. So the steps here would be for that. And the orange dot, the steps. So anywhere you see the dots are color coded on the roof. So let's take the red dot, which means that we're doing this rafter only. So it means that we would select these 2 lines only. It said we're going to array 1 column, the rectangular array we're doing, array rec, which means rectangular array. We're going to go with 1 column, see, 1 column from here going down, and it will be 7 rows, inclusive of the one that you select. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you want to know how 7, by the time you divide the spacing center to center in this distance, then it will tell you how many maximum you can get. But we don't even have to know, because the way how the software is set up, you will get a default of 3, and you just pull it and it just populates it, and you will stop when you know it can't go any further. Now, because we are going to be arraying going down, it's a negative distance. So the 600 between means the distance from center to center. But because I'm going in a negative direction, the value is negative 600. When we're doing the 2 blue ones now, going up, so this rafter and that rafter would have been selected to array them going up. 2 of them going up simultaneously would be still 1 column, right? Then now you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows, but we don't need 6 rows because we already have this rafter and that rafter. So we only need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, we don't even have to put in the amount. It will automatically just pull it up, and it will just populate it, and we will stop. And then over here now, we're going to be arraying these 2 rafters. So we select these 2 up here and these 2 lines down here, and we're going to go this way. Now in this case here, the direction we're going horizontally represents row. When we're coming this way, the directions would have been rows this way, but 1 column. In this case, we're going to go with 1 row going this way, and several columns for the distance in between. All right. So that would be the steps theoretically. We will do that practically in AutoCAD. So I'm going to have to break the recording now, and then when we pick up, we will start with the recording again with the steps in AutoCAD.